Okay, good morning again. A lot of people just came, and my wife asked me to give the announcements again, so let me give them to you. We have cards in the back table there for August birthdays. Feel free to sign your name. Today, as I mentioned earlier, Erin's mother passed away. She was 75, I just found out, and she was saved, so we know where she's at. Little Landy is in the hospital. He had an obstruction in his intestine. So keep all these people in prayer. Ladies' Night Out is August 24th at the Outback. Let Trish know, and we need to take down the tables today. Okay, one of those days. Well, good morning. Today is the August the 20th. We're in 2 Thessalonians Lesson number 17. Let me just see here. Last week we looked at the verses regarding the second coming of the Lord, the event which I believe is the most prophesied and talked about topic in the Bible. Today I will be talking about the root of his aerial campaign, breathing fire and taking vengeance on his enemy. But we need to review a little bit. Let's just have a word of prayer. Dear Lord, thank you again for this word, and I just hope the words I speak today, I speak them clearly and that the people understand. Because that's what you want them to do. Amen. We've been looking at the passages where the Lord comes out of heavenly Zion. Now, I've made a couple mistakes in the next page I'll tell you about. So don't get angry at me, okay? Don't come up and beat me up. I corrected him. It's a rough topic. We continue with this topic. Read again. Let me just go. Read Joel and Amos. You read again Amos chapter 1, verse 2. 1 and 2. And Amos 1 and 2 says, now this is the path the Lord will take when he's flying through the air. He's going to be breathing fire out of his mouth, scorching the earth. Amos 1 and 2. The words of Amos, who was among the herdmen of Tekoa, which he saw concerning Israel in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah, and in the days of Jeroboam, the son of Joash, the king of Israel, 2 years before the earthquake. And he said, the Lord will roar from Zion and utter his voice from Jerusalem, and the habitations of the shepherds shall mourn, and the top of Carmel shall wither. Now go to Joel chapter 3, verse 16. The Lord also shall roar out of Zion and utter his voice from Jerusalem, and the heavens and the earth shall shake, but the Lord will be the hope of his people and the strength of the children of Israel. So, the Lord shall roar out of Zion. He will come back with a battle cry. The heavens shall shake. Isaiah 24 says, for 24:19 on your paper, the earth is utterly broken down, the earth is dissolved. Now that doesn't mean away, okay? It's broken up, it's violated. Well, let me continue. And the earth is moved exceedingly. The earth shall reel to and fro like a drunkard. And remember, this earthquake never happened. It's going to happen in the future. It didn't happen back there. There's no mention of that. And shall be removed like a cottage. A cottage is like a workman's hut. There's no plumbing, no electricity. He just lives there, keep out of the rain. And the transgressions thereof shall be heavy upon it, and it shall fall and not rise again. And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall punish the host of the high ones that are on high, and the kings of the earth upon the earth. Two separate areas. Remember, Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. He fights in the heaven first, then comes down to the earth. And they shall be gathered together as prisoners are gathered in the pit, and shall be shut up in the prison, and after many days they shall be visited. Then the moon shall be confounded, and the sun ashamed when the Lord of hosts shall reign in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem, and before his ancients gloriously. Again, in the beginning, God created heaven and the earth. So what he takes out first is in order with Genesis 1:1. Because when you read after Genesis 1:1, the rest of the part is just about the earth. When you get to Paul's epistles, he starts talking about the heavenly kingdom. You don't read about that in the earth because it was a secret, a mystery. The high ones on high, that's the angelic crowd up there. Notice he is reigning in two places. He is reigning in Mount Zion. Hebrews 12:22 says, just to fit it in here, says the following: But ye are come unto Mount Zion, and unto the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem. So when I'm mentioning Zion here, it's up in heaven. The Lord comes down from that into the second heaven and has his battle. And to an innumerable company of angels. I see Donna's questioning. And we talked about this last week. There's the heavenly Zion, the heavenly Jerusalem. That's where God's going to come from. In the third heaven, down to the second heaven, have the fight with the angels. And halfway through the tribulation, Satan and his angels are going to be kicked out on the planet, on the earth. This is comparing Pauline truth with what's going to happen here. Let me see here. He is reigning in Jerusalem. That is where the headquarters of his kingdom is located on planet Earth, the city of the great king. Isaiah 26, verses 20 and 21. Come, my people, enter thou into thy chambers, and shut thy doors about thee. Hide thyself, as it were for a little moment, until the indignation be overpast. For behold, the Lord cometh out of his place, that's the third heaven, to punish the inhabitants of the earth for their iniquity. The earth also shall disclose her blood, and shall no more cover her slain. That's interesting. The hidden ones. Go to Psalm 83, and let's read about the hidden ones. Psalm 83. Let me read you verses. Let me see here. I'm going to start at verse 1 and go through verse 8. Psalm 83, verse 1 through 8. Keep that thou silence, O God. Hold not thy place, and be not still, O God. For lo, thine enemies make a tumult, and they that hate thee have lifted up the head. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people, and consulted against thy hidden ones. They have said, Come, let us cut them off from being a nation. They don't want Israel as a nation. Didn't God promise them the promised land? Was there a nation there? They were a nation, right? Did God tell them to kick out all the ites? Did they succeed? No. Let them be cut off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. Wipe you out, release everything. It's like what people are doing today. They're getting rid of all the history and all that, and they're thinking it's going to make something better. It's only going to make something worse. For they have consulted together with one consent. They are confederate against thee. They ganged up together. The tabernacles of Edom and the Ishmaelites of Moab and the Hagarenes, Gebal and Ammon and Amalek and the Philistines, with the inhabitants of Tyre. Asher is also joined with them. They have hope in the children of Lot. Selah. Again, here's another verse. It says Selah at the end. It means it's a tribulation verse. Save the hope in children of Israel that have hope in children of Israel. The word hope means armed strength. They're going to be banded together and confederate against Israel. They're going to try to take them out. Let me see here. The Lord cometh out of his place. Where he is coming from already belongs to him. So he goes from the third heaven, heavenly Mount Zion, Jerusalem, goes to the second heaven, has a battle with the angels. All right? Michael and his angels, Satan and his angels. They lose, the angels, the bad angels, and they're kicked out to earth. He has already conquered the heavens. His kingdom is established there. He comes out of his place to punish the inhabitants of earth. So in the prophets, it is clear when he comes. Number one, he is going to have fought a battle in the heavens. Now, certain things I'll be repeating. Two, he's going to reclaim the heavens. Three, and then he's going to come to earth to do the same. This is all laid out in Scripture for you. In Jeremiah 25. Oh, by the way, if you have Amos, I want you to just keep that open. Don't close it up, because we're going to be going back there. I better get there myself. All right. Okay, we're in Jeremiah 25. In Jeremiah 25, he's talking about the restoration of Israel after the Babylonian captivity. That restoration goes way beyond Babylon. Remember last week we talked about the diadem is removed, the crown of authority. They're no longer the head. In fact, he's given to understand that, like in Jeremiah 25, verse 14, for many nations and great kings shall serve themselves of them also. There is going to be more than just Babylon that holds them in captivity. That's when David tells you about the different kingdoms and Gentile dynasties that will hold Israel in captivity and will hold Israel's position in the earth until Jesus comes and sets it right. It's called the time of the Gentiles in Luke 21, verse 24. Babylon wasn't, they were first when Israel lost their authority. But we're going to have other people, Medes and Persians, the Greeks, Rome, all those things. Jeremiah 25, verse 29 and 30. For lo, I begin to bring evil on the city which is called by my name, and should be utterly unpunished. Ye shall not be unpunished, for I will call for a sword upon all the inhabitants of the earth, saith the Lord of hosts. Therefore prophesy thou against them all these words, and say unto them, the Lord shall roar from on high, and utter his voice from his holy habitation. He shall mightily roar upon his habitation. He shall give a shout as they that tread the grapes against all the inhabitants of the earth. Now, what this is not is 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. Let me read it to you. So he comes down, gives a shout, right? Okay? In 1 Thessalonians 4, verse 16 and 17. For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangels, and with the trump of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Lord. Wherefore comfort one another with these words. The Lord doesn't come to the earth. He's in the air. We meet him in the clouds. So this is different in Jeremiah here than 1 Thessalonians 14. And if you don't rightly divide the word of truth, you're not going to get that. You're going to see when the Lord comes, he's going to stand on the Mount of Olives, and it's going to split. Okay? That's the subject of prophecy, not the revelation of the mystery given to Paul. Paul's 13 epistles, it's a whole new thing in the Bible, unknown to the devil until he wrote it down. God kept a secret and then revealed it through Paul, who was a type of the Antichrist at one time. He comes from the heavenly Zion, the third heaven on high. This is a shout that Joel 3:16 is talking about when he roars out of Zion. He is coming out of the heavens, And when he comes down to the earth in flaming fire, taking vengeance with his mighty angels. Joel 3:16, again, the Lord also shall roar out of Zion and utter his voice from Jerusalem. Well, first he roared in the heaven. Now he's roaring on the earth. And the heavens and the earth shall shake, but the Lord will not be the hope of his people. Will be the hope of his people and the strength of the children of Israel. How many times did he, he punished them, went back over and over and over again. So they fell politically in the Old Testament, but they fell spiritually in the book of Acts. When he gave them another year to the leaders of Israel to see that he was the Christ, he was the Messiah, what did they do to him? When Stephen gives their history in Acts chapter 7, they killed Stephen. And they saw Jesus standing, he was going to come and wipe them out. But something happened. The revelation of the mystery. You remember, Joel 3 is the battle at Armageddon. This is where you are in Amos chapter 1, verse 2. You read that in Amos 1:2, but Amos 1:4 will tell you more. Behold, I will send the fire into the house of Hazael, which shall devour the palaces of Ben-Hadad. This is on the earth now. Notice how he's going to send the fire. I wish I had a map printed out. I didn't bring it, but if you think of Israel, how can I put it? You can break it in as far as what states were where, how it was situated back then. The northern part is known as Phoenicia. The south part is Philistia. Okay? Damascus is up here, up in the north. All right? When he comes out burning fire, he's going to go from the north down to the south, then go back up the King's Highway, burning every place he goes. That's what we're going to see. When that flamethrower passes over the land, it's going to take out Damascus. When he comes, the first place that you're told in flaming fire taking vengeance, he is going to start up in the north. This territory up in the north, Damascus and Nineveh and so forth, this is a stronghold of the adversary. Turkey is here. Turkey is a big country. It's more than twice the size of Germany, just a little smaller than Texas and Louisiana combined. But they're at the top of Damascus. And if you go to, keep your hand in Amos there, Revelation chapter 2, you see at that time Satan's seat is in Pergamus, which is a city in Turkey. Revelation chapter 2. And unto the angel of the church of Pergamos write these things that he saith, which hath the sharp sword with two edges. I know thy works, and where Satan dwelleth, even where Satan's seat is. And thou holdest fast my name, and hast not denied my faith, even in those days wherein Antipas was my faithful martyr, who was slain among you, where Satan dwelleth. So, Satan dwelleth in Pergamos. That's Turkey. That's even north of Damascus. You see this, you see the maps of Israel and the name changes and all that throughout the history and the wars. The West Bank and Gaza are occupied by the Palestinians now. They're supposed to be Israel's land. The West Bank is on the Mediterranean Sea, and the Gaza's on the Mediterranean Sea, and the West Bank is further in from the Mediterranean. So, Revelation 12 and 13 is where the seed of Satan starts out. That's why Jesus, in his ministry in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, why he goes to the territory of the Gadarenes. He's up on the northeastern side of the Sea of Galilee, and that's up north, the Sea of Galilee. Now, you can go home and look at a map various times in Israel's picture, the time period, and see where these places are. Gaza is on the coast, down south. The Philistines are up on the coast, are up there too. So he's going down from Zion to start up there in Damascus and comes down the Mediterranean coast. Now he's coming down with fire. He doesn't land yet. Fire is coming out of his mouth, and he's burning everything to it fairly well. Okay? Why would he do that? What's being gathered against Jerusalem? Go to Zechariah chapter 14. All the nations that hate Israel. In Zechariah chapter 14, let me read you verses 1 to 4. Zechariah chapter 14. Behold, the day of the Lord cometh, and thy spoil shall be divided in the midst of thee. For I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city shall be taken, and the houses rifled, the women ravished, and half of the city shall go forth into captivity, and the residue of the people shall not be cut off from the city. Then shall the Lord go forth and fight against those nations as when he fought in the day of battle. And his feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem on the east, and toward Mount Olives shall cleave in the midst thereof, toward the east and toward the west. And there shall be a great valley. The half of the mountain shall remove toward the north, and the half toward the south. Okay? That's when the earthquake happens. Now I know most of this, or a lot of this, isn't understood. I have trouble with it myself. But it's interesting to know the path, and it's the same path that he brought the apostles on. The Israel, when they got out of Egypt. Now, that passage I just read you is a reference to the book of Numbers when he fights the man of war. I have for you Exodus 15:3. The Lord is a man of war. The Lord is his name. And he comes and he executes all those things that are written in the book of the wars of the Lord. There's a book. It's written down. Numbers writes down all these places, and he's going to fight and the battles that will take place there. We have the record of all this put down in writing in the Old Testament. It's pretty much a dress rehearsal for what's to come here. I say those words all the time. A dress rehearsal. Because this is going to be things that's never been seen before. The final battle. Let me see what I have here. Let me take it to a couple of verses. In Genesis 15, Genesis 15:6 is where Abraham believes the Lord. And that ties into Romans 4. But in Genesis 15, let me read you 12 through 16, he falls asleep. Genesis 15, 12 through 16. And when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abraham, and lo, an horror of great darkness fell upon him. And he said unto Abram, know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. And also, that nation whom they shall serve will I judge. And afterward they shall come out with great substance. Remember when they were coming out of Egypt? The people were giving them all their jewelry and money just to get them out because of all those 10 plagues. And thou shalt go to thy fathers in peace. Thou shalt be buried in a good old age. The saved die in peace. But in the fourth generation, they shall come hither again, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. I'll go to Numbers 20, chapter 21, 24. Numbers chapter 21, 21 through 24. Numbers chapter 21, verse 21. And Israel sent messengers unto Sihon, the king of the Amorites, saying, I just read about the Amorites in Genesis 15. Let me not pass through thy land, or let me pass through thy land. We will not turn into the fields or into the vineyards. We will not drink of the waters of the well, but we will go along by the king's highway until we be past thy borders. They just wanted to walk through on the route. Did the king give them pass? Let them pass through? No, he refused them. And Sihon would not suffer Israel to pass through his border. But Sihon gathered all his people together and went out against Israel into the wilderness, and he came to Jahaz and fought against Israel. And Israel smote him with the edge of the sword and possessed his land from Arnon unto Jabbok, even unto the children of Ammon, for the border of the children of Ammon was strong. Now, I want you to go to Deuteronomy 3, but you know who Ammon is? Ammon? Does that ring a bell? There's the Ammonites and the Amorites. Those where the giants came from. And they were eventually wiped out. Not the Amorites, the Ammonites. Deuteronomy chapter 3, verse 11. For only Og, king of Bashan, remained of the remnant of giants. Behold, his bedstead was a bedstead of iron. Is it not in Rabbath of the children of Ammon? 9 cubits was the length thereof, and 4 cubits of the breadth of it, after the cubit of a man. Now, they took out Ammon too. See here. So, when they wouldn't let him through, the king Sihon, the Amorite, they ended up taking him out, and the Ammonites, the giants, at that time. Only one was left, and that was this guy right here. You don't see him anymore. He would be about 13 and a half feet wide by 6 feet wide. Can you imagine hugging a man at 6 feet wide? I mean, how far? You wouldn't even get around the middle, would you? I mean, could you dance or anything? You couldn't get your hand back there? Jeez. I thought that would be a hard thing to do. Now, if you're still in Deuteronomy 3, let me read why they kicked them out. The land was given to the 2 tribes of Israel, Reubenites and Gadites. Chapter 3, verse 8. And we took out at that time of the hand of the 2 kings of the Amorites, and the land that was on this side of the Jordan, from the river of Arnon unto Mount Hermon, which Hermon the Sidonians called Sirion, and Amorites called Shinir. I won't go further than that. It's going to get too confusing. But it was given that Reuben and the Gadites were to get that piece of land. It was lived in by all the ites that Joshua said, knock these people out. He had a northern campaign, he had a southern campaign, he had a central campaign, and they didn't succeed. There's just wasn't enough time to knock those people out. So that's what would happen when the Lord's coming down. Comes down from the third heaven, has the battle there, and starts burning things up from Damascus all the way down. We have the record, as I told this. Do you know why he's doing this? The armies of the nations of the earth are gathered against Jerusalem. Think of the time that they've been, treated badly. think of what Hitler, now that's, I was a baby boomer, how he felt about the Jews. I'm watching these things on YouTube about all these Nazi generals, and they were hung for their cruelty and all that in the prison camps, and how that one German guy saved a lot of people. He was an industrialist. They have a movie about him, and Schindler's List, right? How he used his money and influence to get out a lot of people. They have a memorial to him in the graves out there, and they love the man. But so all the nations of the earth were gathered together with him. Now, God gave the promised land, and there's definite boundaries to it. And they've given up some land for this or from that. They won some wars, but Gaza and the West Bank are the two individual, the one state, where the Palestinians live in. Okay, Gaza's on the Mediterranean, and the West Bank is north by crossing from the river there. So again, you have Gaza, Amos 1:6. At the end of Amos 1, verse 8, go back there. Let me start at verse 3. But thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Damascus, and for 4 I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they have threshed Gilead with threshing instruments of iron. But I will send a fire into the house of Hazael, which shall devour the palaces of Ben-Hadad. And I will break also the bar of Damascus, and cut off the inhabitants from the plain of Avon, and him that holdeth the scepter from the house of Eden, and the people of Syria shall go into captivity, go into captivity unto Kir, saith the Lord. For thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Gaza, and for 4 I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they carried away captive the whole captivity to deliver them up to Edom. But I will send a fire on the wall of Gaza, which shall devour the palaces thereof, and I will cut off the inhabitant from Ashdod, and him that holdeth the scepter of Ashkelon. I will turn my hand against Ekron, and the remnant of the Philippines shall perish, saith the Lord God. This is his aerial campaign when he gets through with the battle in heaven. The remnant of the Philistines shall perish, saith the Lord God. Gaza is right there. That's the Philistine. In the south, it's called Philistia. Remember that? Up north, it's called Phoenicia. The term Philistine is where the term Palestine came from. Around 135 AD, I've talked about this, the Romans took Israel out of the land for the last time. They sowed the fields with salt so they could not farm it anymore. And they renamed the land Palestine after the bitter enemies of Israel on the southern coast. That's one of my mistakes. It says northern there. Southern. Southern coast, the Philistines. So when he is talking about Gaza there and the remnant of the Philistines, he is talking about what we call Palestinians. The territories of Lebanon and Syria, etc., are up in the north. He starts up there, then comes down the coast. He comes from the north and comes south. Tyre, that's Phoenicia. That's up in the north there. Read Amos 1 verses 9 and 10. Thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions, Tyrus, and for the 4 I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they delivered up the whole captivity to Edom, and remembered not the brotherly covenant. But I will send a fire on the wall of Tyrus, which shall devour the palaces thereof. I've got the city, Tyrus, instead of Tyrus. But so you see that punishment coming down to them. Edom, Teman, and Bozrah, verse 11 and 12. Thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Edom, for 4, I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because he did pursue his brother with the sword, and did cast off all pity in his anger to tear perpetually, and he kept his wrath forever. But I will send a fire upon Teman, which shall devour the palaces of Bozrah. Okay? These three territories are very important places in the minor prophets and in the prophets. They are all located south of the Dead Sea. Okay? So you're down south now. This is the territory where the Lord sets the earth on fire. This is the land of Bozrah and Idumea. This is where the shaft you see going down to hell will be. Isaiah 60, the last verse in Isaiah 66. Let's go there. During the millennial kingdom, people, for 1,000 years, people will be able to walk to this site and see the souls burning in hell. Last verse in Isaiah 66. Verse 23. And it shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another, shall all flesh come to worship before me, saith the Lord. And they shall go forth and look upon the carcasses of the men that have transgressed against me, for their worm shall not die, neither shall their fire be quenched, and they shall be an abhorring unto all flesh. This is during the millennial kingdom. Armageddon happens after the 1,000 years. In the kingdom period, the nations have to obey. Israel's ruling again. But there's a whole bunch of them out there that don't like the Lord. So when Satan's let loose again, that's when the battle happens. That's when there's blood that's bridle deep and all those things you read about in the Bible there. Now back to Amos. Read verse 13. For thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of the children of Ammon, and for 4 I will not turn away. The punishment thereof, because they have ripped up the women with child of Gilead, that they might enlarge their border. Ammon is on the east side of the Jordan River. You've got the Mediterranean here. You got Gaza on the coast. And you go into somewhat, and you got the Jordan River. Okay? So what the Lord is doing is coming down the Mediterranean coast, and he loops up north again. He doesn't go all the way down to the Gulf of Aqaba. He goes south of the Dead Sea, a little south, and goes up north again, and that's called the King's Highway. Okay? The King's Highway is also called the Way of the Patriarchs. There are biblical narratives that it was frequently traveled by Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It ran from Egypt across the Sinai Peninsula to Aqaba, and then northward to Damascus, which is right up in the north, and the Euphrates River. It is a major north-south route, and probably one of the oldest in the world. Now, are you all confused now? I know this is pretty dry. I won't do this again. But I want you to get an idea that, well, I'll show you in the verses. The Dead Sea, by the way, is a salt lake bordering Jordan to the east and Israel to the west. Okay? Now, when you look at a map today, there's Syria and Jordan and Lebanon. Those are the places that are there now. Iraq. Its surface and shores are 427 meters below sea level. That's 1,400.92 feet below sea level. It's the lowest level on the earth. The Dead Sea, it's called the Salt Sea too, is 306 meters deep. That's 1,000.94 feet deep. The deepest hypersaline lake in the world. And the salt percentage is like 36% or something like that, versus 3% in the ocean. Drink some of that, you'd be gone pretty quick. Now, Amos chapter 2, verse 1. Thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Moab, and for 4 I will not turn away. The punishment thereof, because he burned the bones of the king of Edom into lime. Moab is east of the Dead Salt Sea. So what you get in Amos he focuses on the Gentile nations that the Lord is going to destroy. He starts in Damascus. He comes down the Mediterranean coast. He loops around back up. This is the route that the Lord brought Israel into the land of promise. You recall when Israel came out of the wilderness, they came up to the Jordan, then they crossed the Jordan. They were east at first. They were east of the Jordan in the east part. Then they went west. This is exactly the territory the Gentile nations are in as in the days of battle. So when he brought them out of Egypt, he brought them further south in the Dead Sea in the Gulf of Aqaba, then brought them up north. So they were east. The Jordan River was there. They were on the east side of the Jordan River. When they get up so far, John crosses, Israel, Amos 2, verse 6. Thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Israel, and for 4 I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they sold the righteous for silver, and the poor for a pair of shoes. Imagine selling somebody for a pair of shoes. I'd want at least a couple of pair. The Lord is going to wipe out all the rebels in Israel also. There was a mixed multitude that came out from Egypt. That means they weren't all Jewish. There are a couple of other passages that help follow this through. There are passages back there that talk about the Lord's coming. When you read these and say, that's back in Exodus, yet this stuff is all future. The thing in Exodus is a dress rehearsal for what is coming eventually. Again, and if you don't rightly divide, you don't know that. You can't make hide nor hair of these countries over here. I mean, what sense does it make? It has to do with the tribulation. You see all these battles and blood you spilled, killing of women and children. God says kill the women, all back here. But it's for one reason. He promised in the promised land. He's not going to welch on his promise. He's going to give it back to them. He destroys nations and all the people in Israel that aren't true when he comes back, and it's going to be something like the world has never seen. Even with the atom bomb we have, it's just what it says. Deuteronomy chapter 33, if you go there. We're almost done here. And thanks for putting up with me in this lesson here. Deuteronomy 33, verses 1 to 3. And this is the blessing wherewith Moses, the man of God, blessed the children of Israel before his death. And he said, the Lord came from Sinai and rose up from Mount Seir unto them. He shined forth from Mount Paran, and he came with 10,000s of saints from his right hand when a fiery law for them. Yea, he loved the people. All the saints are in thy hand, and they sat down at thy feet. Every one shall receive of my words. Now, the Lord came from Sinai, but you say that's when he came out of Exodus. But read verse 26. 33:26. There is none like unto the God of Jeshurun, who rideth upon the heaven in thy help, and in his excellency on the sky. Jeshurun is another name for Israel. Okay? But watch. It says here, who rideth upon the heaven in thy help, and his excellency of the sky. Verse 27, Deuteronomy 32, the eternal God is thy judge. 33, verse 28, Israel shall then dwell in safety alone. Verse 29, happy art thou, O Israel, who is like unto thee, O people saved by the Lord, the shield of thy help. And who is the sword of thy excellency? And thine enemies shall be found liars unto thee, and thou shalt tread upon their high places. So, can you understand at least when he starts out in the north, there's There's Satan up there. The Satan seat is in Pergamos. That's in Turkey. But he starts out with Damascus and all those northern Gentile places, and he comes down the coast. He's burning things up. He's in the air. His feet hasn't touched. And he goes a little south of the Dead Sea and brings them up the King's Highway, burning everything out there. Because part of Israel's land was on the east side of the Jordan River, on the west side and east side. Reubenites and the Gadites had part of the east side that God gave to them. You just need to understand that. But he had this aerial campaign, and let's continue here. Riding upon the heavens. No. When we see Deuteronomy 33:2, we came from Sinai. I'm sorry, let me back up again. This is exactly what's going on in the second advent. And they never went on back in Moses' day. They didn't go in Joshua's day. And they never went back in Israel's day at all. They never conquered the country, the promised land. God said, expel all the heathen nations. They failed. So God's going to come back. You know, he's got to do a lot of things to keep his promise. He's got to burn up the land, and all those people that are down there, all those ites down there, get them out of the land, and he has to do this for them. When we read Deuteronomy 33, verse 2, he came from Sinai. The idea is that when he comes down the Mediterranean coast, he comes all the way down to the Sinai Peninsula. Then he loops up just south of the Dead Sea and takes the same route that Israel took across the wilderness up through Edom, Teman, Seir, Bozrah, and Idumea, and all of that. And he's riding on the heavens. He is flying in the air, and his fire is still destroying. He's up there pouring out his wrath. Many of you even knew that the Lord had an aerial campaign? Did you ever think of that? Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Riding upon the heavens, Psalm 68, verse 1. Let God arise. Let his enemies be scattered. Let them also that hate him flee before him. Let God arise. That's like Acts 7 when Stephen sees Jesus standing. All these verses in the Old Testament about the Lord rising, standing for what? To judge his people. When it says, let them that hate him, you want to write down Psalm 83 and read how they hate him. You remember how they hated the Lord? They hated the people. They wanted to undo them as a nation. You can't have a nation. You're no people. You're no good. Go pound sand. Nothing. You don't get to do that. They're going to make Israel no more a nation. That's what they're confederate about. They all hate him. Remember, in Genesis 16, they're living in sight of their brethren. They're all related. Cousins like that. Why? Because they hate God. And they hate the God of Israel. There are numerous times in the Bible where God is called the God of Abraham and the God of Israel. God of Israel, yeah. He's never called the God of Allah. Not one time. What does that do to you? But over and over again, he's called the God of Israel. He's not just called the God of gods. He is called the God of Israel. And if you want to know why the world hates Israel, it's because he is the God of this book. That's why our final authority is so special. I think we're getting... yeah. But anyway, I thought it was interesting and fascinating about the aerial campaign. It's kind of hard to understand because we're not familiar with the territory. But if you look at the maps of Israel in various time periods, it's just amazing. You see the outlines changing, the borders changing from wars and whatever, the 67 war and all these kind of things. It's changing all the time. But ultimately, God is going to take out all of Israel's enemies. And Israel is going to be back in the entire promised land that was given to them. And we'll be raptured before that happens. Dear Lord, thank you for this word, and thank you for the words that you try to teach us as far as what happened in the past and why, when we come into the New Testament and you read Paul's letters, here's why these things happened. So he explains that, and we get to learn it, and we get to teach it. I just pray that we just keep this message in our heart and just put it out there as much as we can. Amen. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to close with page 88, Love Lifted Me.